Good morning and welcome to Municipal Council for Tuesday, May the 26th. It's 9 o'clock and we'll call the meeting to order and begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and we are privileged to share the land with them. Are there any announcements, acknowledgements, or recognitions? Before we start, I'll just say welcome back to Councillor DeLong. Good to have you back in your seat. We look forward to your contribution. And are there other acknowledgements? Councillor Smith.
I just wanted to say thank you to the Kildog Cove Road Association for hosting a Fire Smart presentation on the weekend in Parkdale, Maplewood. The session was well attended by people from the Sherbrooke Lake area with representation from Walden, New Germany, and Cornwall volunteer fire departments. At the end of the session, Jeremy Dan, the president of the association, concluded with some ideas for further collaboration between DNR, the fire departments, local road associations, and the municipality. There are multiple challenges posed by the lake roads, including emergency egress, narrow lanes, communication with seasonal residents, and poor cell service. So we all recognize we need to work together to mitigate wildfire risk. And just related to this, I wanted to share an event that's coming up on June 9th. Climate Atlantic is hosting a webinar on wildfire mitigation, and it's open to municipal staff and electeds, as well as community leaders in the fire service and beyond. So I thought people might be interested in that.
Other announcements? I would like to recognize that this is Reed Shepherd's last week with us here at the municipality, and I just want to wish him well in his new role in Colchester County and thank him for the work that he's done, particularly heavy year for here as we work through our municipal planning strategy, but we've enjoyed working with you and we wish you the best in your new job, and we will miss you, but we'll look forward to whoever's stepping into those new roles. And we do have a proclamation today because we are in Access Awareness Week, whereas the week of May 31st to June 6th, which is actually next week, but we're on the verge of it, is recognized as Access Awareness Week, a week to celebrate achievements made both by and for persons with disabilities in the areas of accessibility, transportation, housing, employment, recreation, education, and communication. And whereas this is the 40th year that this public awareness initiative has taken place in Nova Scotia, and the theme for 2026 Access Awareness Week is Disability Justice, Stronger Together, First Voice, Leading Collective Action. And whereas accessibility barriers are many and interconnected, and removing and preventing them is challenging and complex. And whereas the foundation of Nova Scotia's Accessibility Act is to provide, support, and protect the rights of persons with disabilities to full inclusion and accessibility by the identification, prevention, and removal of accessibility barriers. And whereas Access Awareness Week promotes the inclusion of all Nova Scotians with disabilities as full citizens within our communities. And whereas through public awareness, community partnerships, and education, this campaign aims to foster an environment of equal participation for persons with disabilities within the District of Lunenburg. Therefore, I, Elspeth McLean-Weil, Mayor of the District of Lunenburg, hereby proclaim May 31st to June 2nd, 2026, Access Awareness Week in the District of Lunenburg. And we will be having a presentation on accessibility today and further activities related to accessibility with a panel and flag raising in the weeks to come. There is, I know, no public input today. We have the guests in our gallery are presenting, and we'll move on. I should say, before we move on, as I always do, and we try to remind people that this public input is an important part of what we consider our communication with our residents, and an opportunity for residents to speak of their concerns and share that with council. We have it at each of our meetings at the beginning of the meeting and encourage residents to take part in that and bring forward concerns and ideas that they may have that they wish to share with us. We should move then to item number 4, which is approval of the agenda. Would someone make that motion? Councillor Brooks, seconded by Councillor Burns. All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Motion is carried unanimously. The minutes of the May 12th meeting have been circulated. Are there any corrections or additions that need to be made to those minutes? Seeing none, I'll declare those minutes approved as circulated. We have no business arising from the minutes. We have no awarding of tenders, and we will move right to our presentation today from the Lunenburg County Accessibility Advisory Committee. And I'm not sure who's making the Lola, Ms. Church, and perhaps you could just introduce yourself and then make your presentation.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to look for the microphone help, make sure I'm speaking into it. Thank you so much, Mayor and councillors, for having me here. I'm here in my role as the chair of the Lunenburg Accessibility Advisory Committee, but what brings me to the work of the committee is that I'm the executive director for the Nova Scotia Community Living Organizations. We're a coalition of 57 service providers across the province who support people with disabilities and mental health support needs, a few of whom operate in this county. I'm also the secretary of the Disability Rights Coalition, the group that's the watchdog for the work of the Human Rights Remedy, and I'm the chair of the Western Regional Advisory Committee for the Disability Support Program related to that Human Rights Remedy work. I want to say that I have Ellen, our accessibility coordinator, and Louise, our vice chair, here today for both moral and potentially tech support, hoping I can figure it all out with the 2 screens and monitors. Okay, work both at the same time. So the Lunenburg Accessibility Advisory Committee was established in 2019. Under the obligation for the Nova Scotia Accessibility Act. It is regional, meaning it includes representation from the municipal districts of Lunenburg and Chester, the towns of Lunenburg, Bridgewater, and Mahone Bay, and the village of Chester. Those representatives are elected officials and make up half of the committee. To comply with the Accessibility Act, the other 50% of the committee is made up of people either living with disability or those who represent organizations who support people with disabilities like myself. The Accessibility Advisory Committee has a few different roles that we wanted to just either let you know of or remind you of today. So we are meant to provide advice to you as a council, and we want to ensure that you're aware of our role and what we can offer. The terms of reference for this committee include the following. We provide advice on the required accessibility plan and update. That includes the preparation, implementation, and effectiveness. Our role is also to provide advice to council on opportunities to promote full participation of persons with disabilities and the accessibility of existing and proposed municipal services and facilities. The committee also makes recommendations about strategies designed to achieve the objectives of the municipalities or commission's accessibility plans. We receive information from councils and commissions and make recommendations as requested. We monitor provincial and federal government directives and regulations. We host public consultations related to accessibility across the municipality. We provide input and advice to update accessibility plans every 3 years. We provide an annual budget for the committee to carry out its mandate. And as Mayor McLean-Weil was discussing, we also do events like for Accessibility Advisory Week. As you can see from this list, this committee can support you as councillors to ensure that accessibility is considered not only in work specifically focused on accessibility, but also with respect to work where accessibility may not be top of mind, but it is still absolutely integral to ensuring people with disabilities can participate fully in community. So we know that often councils come to us if they have a plan in mind to improve accessibility, but our hope is certainly that you think about us for all projects and input, because accessibility means different things to different people, and often the mistakes come when we think we know what people with disabilities may want or need, which is why they have the phrase, nothing about us without us. So we have come up with 2 accessibility plans since the council was formed. The image on the slide here shows the current plan in both a plain text and a more visual format. We've also participated in building relationships through our participation as members who have networks of people who care about accessibility and through our efforts to connect with community. An example is the upcoming First Voice panel discussion for Accessibility Advisory Week happening here. These relationships with persons with disabilities and allies can help support engagement of people who may not have traditionally been engaged with municipal government. These voices can support making better accessibility decisions. We, as committee members, can be champions in community for projects that incorporate accessibility. So not only are we here to advise, but we're here to champion the good work that you're already all doing. In addition, counselors serving on the committee are provided with more information about accessibility issues in community and can bring that knowledge to the council table. This slide shows an image of the renovated washrooms at Wild Rose Park in Western Shore. It's an example of a project the committee has provided advice on. One of our committee members also visited the park to give additional advice as the final touches were being made. We have given advice on designs for Sawpit Wharf and Modal and Civic Square in the town of Lunenburg. We had a lot to say about initial designs of these projects, and we believe that feedback was supportive of more accessible designs. There are some challenges as working as committee. We've highlighted a few of those here for you. First, there are just gaps in knowledge around accessibility. People don't always know when we need to think about it and what to do about problems when we find them. A colleague and friend of mine was discussing how sometimes we tick boxes related to accessibility or we think we know what we're doing. And he had been that day to a McDonald's, not in our municipality, where they had an accessible entrance and they had accessible parking on opposite sides of the building. For him, as a wheelchair user in February, made it an inaccessible experience for him. And so while it ticked the box of accessibility, the actual design did not prove to be accessible for many people with mobility needs. Second, there's often concern about the actual perceived cost of making things accessible. And we know that there can be sometimes an increased cost compared with designs that do not consider accessibility. We also know that this is not always the case and that intentional planning that considers accessibility often does not always result in increased cost. We also know that we don't include accessibility in our designs. We knowingly exclude members of our community. Also want to remind everybody that many of the things that improve accessibility for people with mobility needs, for example, like a cut curb leading to a crosswalk, don't just benefit people with accessibility needs. They benefit parents who are pushing strollers or people who are pulling luggage behind them, and that these improvements benefit community at large, not just people with accessibility needs. Finally, a key challenge with accessibility work is that the people who most understand the barriers, those with disabilities and those who have close relationships with them, are often not represented amongst decision makers. So unless we are intentionally pulling these folks into the process, we don't have all the information we need to make good decisions that will actually work for them. Some other challenges we've identified include things like councils just knowing that they can ask for advice and make that request. We are still fairly new and we're all figuring out our roles and communication and how to work well together. We don't hear from all of the councils as often as we'd like, and we would very much like to provide our advice to you all. Expectations, meaning that we don't always have a great understanding of what you as councils and municipalities hope to get from us. We are at least 50% a group of volunteers, some of us new to this work. We have a lot of collective knowledge and experience related to disability, but sometimes working with councils is a new process for us. And knowing what expectations you have for us is also very helpful. Communication, how would you like to hear from us? Would you welcome unsolicited advice? Different councils have different opinions about that. Should we only respond when you ask us for feedback? As I said, we volunteer our time and expertise, and our hope is to support, to make our communities more inclusive, but we want to know how best to communicate that with councils. These are foundational and more process-oriented challenges, but certainly not a barrier that we feel is impossible to make things happen. We want to work with you to decrease the impact of those challenges. So, one really big key message is, again, we talk about how we're talking about accessibility. People with disabilities make up over 37% of the people in this province, so we're talking about a significant number of people. To repeat, a lot of them are not amongst our decision makers. We use several lenses when we consider advice. We can use an accessibility lens that considers how the results of a decision will impact the experience of people with varying disabilities. We also use an intersectional lens to consider how other identities, such as race, sexual orientation, gender identity, socioeconomic status, and other identities a person might have could intersect and impact their experience. Unfortunately, amongst those 37% of people living disabilities, we know that people with disabilities disproportionately live in poverty, as an example, which can amplify their experiences. We use a human rights lens, and that means we recognize that people with disabilities are entitled to the same rights of other people, including access in their communities, and we consider whether the outcome of the decisions respect that right. So for next steps, really we're just asking that you remember we're here and that we're here to support you, and that you consider how you can best access us and benefit from the perspectives that members of the council bring. And we hope that we can continue our work together, supporting a movement to a community where everyone feels they have the ability to belong. And that is the end of our slideshow.
You will take questions?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Are there questions from council? Councillor Smith.
Thanks so much for the presentation. I wondered if you could give examples of things that have been referred to your committee from councils, and, just around expectations. What does a successful kind of referral to your committee look like?
I may land on one of my compatriots, because I'll say that in my time as on the council, which is coming up on a year, we haven't had a new referral. So that's the first thing that I'll say, is that we haven't had one to review in my short time.
Yeah, so it's Ellen speaking as a regional accessibility coordinator, and I support the committee in their work. I think actually, MODL, you are a great example of a good process. So back the Sawpit Wharf project, and I understand that's been kind of the timeline has shifted on that lately. But when that project started, the staff, before it came to council, the staff brought some designs or some concept designs to the committee for their review. Then that was part of the kind of the community engagement process. And then it went back to council, and that feedback had been incorporated into the recommendations for council, or the requests for, I don't know if it was direction or decision from council. And then after you had made decision, you sent it back to the committee for additional review of that final design. And so I think that was a really good example of kind of like seeking feedback at different points along the way, and that gave the committee a chance to see the process as well, and see how their advice had been incorporated into the process.
Other questions? While people are thinking a bit, you mentioned your specific work on the human rights remedy, and I wonder if you could make some comments on the challenges that is facing and placing clients in community, and what maybe we need to be more aware of as a municipality, because I expect the easy placements happen first to some extent, and then there are much more challenging placements to come. So I don't know if that's true or not, but it would be interesting for us to hear about this.
It certainly has been true in other jurisdictions, and one of the pieces of advice that I received from British Columbia, who deinstitutionalized about 30 years ago, was don't do that. Because often what happens is then community feels almost at capacity when you're making some of the tougher decisions around support. That being said, I'm not sure how it'll all unfold, but what I will say is that we're repatriating hundreds of people back into community. hundreds of people who have been institutionalized and separated from community, which we know from the TRC work is a trauma in and of itself when we forcibly separate people from their communities of choice. We know one of those institutions is here in Bridgewater, which will be that part of, not the organization, but that facility will be closing. And so some of the challenges that I think municipalities really need to consider are things like infrastructure, transportation. We do not want to be taking people from large institutions and building small ones. One of our lovely advocates from New Zealand reminds us that institutionalization is a mindset, not a place. And so what I really think communities need to do, especially communities who've lived around an institution where people have been othered and segregated, is really battle the mindsets of the community moving back, reminding them that people with disabilities aren't inherently vulnerable. They're vulnerable because systems put up barriers that make them more vulnerable, that people with disabilities have the same rights to access to our community, and that we need to make sure that we're, making that more open and accessible for them, and really about welcoming. Again, this is going to be at times a beautiful transition. I'm very passionate about the human rights remedy work, and I would talk too much longer than you have time for today about it. But what I really, really care about is making sure people have access to good lives in community, and that our communities are prepared to welcome people back into community after being separated for so long. And then the other pieces like housing and infrastructure and transportation, staffing, I don't want to minimize those things, but the really nice thing is that we have so many more opportunities for people to employ and work and support people to live those really good lives in community.
Just further to that, because I went to the opening on King Street of the Balsam Care facility there, and what they've done is create a drop-in center, and they offer programming in a place where, because their clients, in many cases, because of housing, are in the town.
Yes.
And as I understand, clients have a choice about where they want to live, should they want to move back to New Germany, or if they have connections there. But I don't think this is something as a municipality we've really thought much about. Maybe we just haven't, at the council level, heard about it yet. But from a recreation point of view and a sense of belonging, all of these are elements of this that I don't think we're well connected into, and maybe I'm all wrong in this, but I'm not sure we're well connected into that work in a way that we can maybe build it out as part of, when we think about recreation and our recreation activities, how that might help to support some of this. So I think that's something we need to think more about. And also in the placement, I mean, we don't have a lot of opportunity in the housing area. We have a housing strategy, but when you talk about infrastructure, we are a bit limited in what we do there. And when we know that most of our housing stock in the municipality is in single-family homes as opposed to multi-unit, whether it be 2 or 4 units that could share a common area and common living space. We don't really have that either. So there are many challenges, and I don't know how, with all respect, the deadlines are going to be met on.
And I'll say that, I mean, the Remedy Riders took some of that into perspective. Home Share, one of the newer programs, does allow for people to live in those family homes, and I'd be more than happy if the council wanted to come back at a separate time to discuss the Remedy or Home Share in particular. I think in the next 2 weeks the Premier is going to make a big announcement about home sharing specifically. And you're right, and it's not this municipal council. I've met with many. I happen to live in Bars Corner, so I happen to be really connected to this council, but part of my work, because I'm a provincial organization, is meeting with municipal councils across the province. And I met recently with the CBRM mayor to talk about housing. Like, it's an issue province-wide, for sure, housing specifically, as well as things like transportation. And I think that part of the reason is that why councils are just coming to this work now is that really a lot of the early remedy work was at the government level around staffing, and now we're in what Maria Medioli, the executive director of DSP, calls the messy middle, and we are in the messy middle. And I think everybody's worried about the timelines. We're entering year 4 of a 5-year plan, and still there are hundreds of people to move into community. I think we're less concerned about the timeline than getting it right. But also there has to be a timeline, because as one of our remedy writers said, every day is a day too long to ask somebody to have their human rights violated. So the DRC had to balance doing something really quickly. It took British Columbia maybe 20 years, and we're doing it in 5, according to the timeline. But also, when a court ruling has happened saying people's human rights are being violated, that does put a push to get that solved. So I think, not with my DRC hat on, because it is their job to push for that timeline, but with my community-minded hat on, it's likely there's a lot more work to be done, more than the next 2 years. And I love that municipal councils are asking, is there more that we need to learn and do? Because I think that's really where we are in the scope of the work, is now what can community do to, within their capability and capacity, to make things more accessible. And I don't just mean infrastructure accessible, I mean mindset accessible, I mean welcoming accessible, I mean that move to community for Balsam. I'm a little bit partial, my future son-in-law works there, so I do know about that. But that's a really good example of how institutions were intentionally located outside of city centers. That was purposeful. It's an international strategy to take people away from community, and instead Balsam is moving back into the middle of downtown to say, this is where people with disabilities live, these are where the supports they want to access are located, let's make it a walkable, accessible community. And so that's a really intentional move by an organization to bring back into community that accessibility.
Other questions? Okay. Oh, Councillor Reinhardt.
Thanks. Maybe I'm not understanding it correctly, but it sounds like from what you're saying, there isn't really a clear policy on when things get referred to the committee. Is that correct?
I'm going to defer to Ellen.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's in the terms of reference that for the committee that generally issues related to policy, facilities, projects can be referred to the committee, but as far as I'm aware, there's not like it's at the discretion of councils when that happens.
Do you think that there is, because you mentioned wanting to get more referrals, so do you think that there is room for any adjustment in any of that to help with that, or how? What do you see as the solution to that, or helping with that?
I would first say I doubt councils would want us to mandate a policy about when they had to, and I think what that would do is kind of box in a defined set of rules, when what we really want is for councils just to think about us and say, you know, we're here when you need us. What are your thoughts, Ellen?
Yeah, it's Ellen speaking. I would agree with that, and I think it's, you know, there has been discussion at the staff level around, you know, what sorts of things, you know, at what stages of projects should things and which types of projects should be referred. But again, it varies quite a lot across the different municipalities and the different councils, what I think they would like to do. So I think it does make sense to leave it up to the discretion of councils, but I think that's also a reason to have councillors be very aware of what the offerings are from the committee and their knowledge and their, Laura mentioned the lenses that really get applied in these decisions. And that's really an asset that I think councils can use to, again, make those really good, solid decisions that incorporate accessibility and will allow people to be, you know, truly included. And, you know, that really applies to the remedy work and the people who will be, finding themselves living back in the community.
If I just make a comment, I think these are important questions and something we may want to follow up on, but at council here, we approve a budget, we approve projects, and then it goes to staff. And we're relying very much on staff to make sure that the steps are taken. We get reports back, we hear about accessibility and accessibility features fairly often, but we maybe need to ask the question to make sure that this is always done and to what extent it's done, and where it gets to the committee as opposed to you, Alan, who get brought in and that then maybe becomes your call, and maybe you can comment on this, as to when you think it needs to go to the committee versus what input you can provide as an expert in this area. If you could comment on that, then we'll go to Councillor Smith.
Yeah, it's Ellen speaking again. I would love to comment on that. One of the things that will happen this year that's on kind of my work plan is updating the terms of reference for the committee. And I think that will be a great opportunity to add in things like, obviously with consultation with staff and councils of what's, who can ask the committee for advice, because right now in the terms of reference, it is councils who would refer things for advice or feedback from the committee. So as you say, it's often staff who are working on projects, and councils depend on staff, for their work and to follow the processes. So, does it make more sense for staff to be able to refer things or come consult with the committee, which has kind of been happening on a one-off basis here and there. And I think that both the committee and staff have found that really, really effective, because they can come at early stages in projects, or it can be just a small thing that maybe wouldn't even get to council for a long time, like a policy update or something like that, the committee can provide feedback on quickly and easily. They do meet monthly, so that is a quite quick turnaround, generally speaking. So, so I think the terms of reference update will be really helpful. And also, like you say, there are lots of things that I get pulled in on, on a daily basis. I guess, part of my role could be being a little bit more, proactive about which projects might end up with the committee and which ones can just be handled at a staff level. Thanks.
Thank you for that. I think it highlights some things we need to think about a little bit ourselves. Councillor Smith and then Councillor DeLong.
That kind of answers my question. It was really about what the mayor had mentioned. I guess just to get really specific around the accessibility playground, that seems like a big one that we're moving forward on. Does that, it was when that came to council, there was the question, does this go to our accessibility coordinator to look at? So maybe you could just comment on how has that gone to committee? Or does it require us to refer something to the committee at a later stage? If you could comment on that. And just as a secondary comment around communication, I do, and maybe this is for council to talk about at a later time, I would like to see the accessibility reports in our agenda packages. Just for communicating to the broader public about the accessibility committee and how important the work is, and it just gets our eyes on those reports more often.
I guess this is for me again. It's Ellen again. So you do receive the minutes from the Accessibility Advisory Committee each time they meet. So that is a bit of an update, I guess, on what they're up to. In terms of the accessible playground, you're referring to the one at the Mark, is that correct? I can't see, so.
Yes.
Yes, okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry, yes.
I'm assuming that was a nod. So that has not gone to the committee. That is something that I, as staff have had a look at. And I'm assuming I'll be, pulled into that as it goes forward. But yeah, it hasn't gone to the committee for feedback at this point. And that would be, I would think it would make sense to do that. But also there's, I think, a bigger discussion around, broader community engagement, because projects like that impact they're used by lots of different people. And, as much as the committee has lots of experience and knowledge, I don't think, I think about who's on the committee and we can't represent everyone. And so I think that's where digging into, folks out in the community a little more broadly is also a really good strategy. And that may be something, that the committee would advise on, like, who would you want to talk to, like that kind of thing. So I think the level of types of feedback that they can provide go from everything from that, like what sorts of engagement might be helpful in this situation to really reach people with disabilities, and make sure you have all of that information to consider, all the way to, that piece of playground equipment doesn't make sense for, like make sure you get a metal slide instead of a, fiberglass slide. So yeah, so I think there's a huge amount of information that committee could provide in a situation like that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor DeLong.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I'm interested to know more about the regional approach that this committee takes. I've sat on the committee and I know the work and its importance in our community. I think that regional work can be very collaborative and successful, but it takes extra work. So if you could comment on how we can work with our neighbors and how we can learn from each other, I would appreciate that. Thanks.
I think just the opportunity, knowing that there's, representatives from each of the districts and councils on that panel means we get to hear what every place, what work is being done and how that's happened. So for example, the Saw Pit Wharf, all of the other regional reps would have heard and gone through that process with us to see how it went from start to finish, with the hopes that they take that back to their councils and then say, this is how that worked. We should be considering this on future projects. And I also think the regional approach is so essential because we run the risk sometimes of urbanizing accessibility projects. Sometimes I love that the Mark is getting an accessible playground. That makes a ton of sense. But it's also important to remember that there's people with accessibility needs in my neck of the woods in Bars Corner in New Germany, which may benefit from the upgrades, for example, at I think it's Indian Falls that are happening currently. And so sometimes when we aren't really intentionally regional with really rural representation, we run the risk of urbanizing projects and not taking into account that somebody in New Germany, as an example, just because it's near where I'm from, may not have the means to transport their children in to play at that accessible playground. So making sure that we keep all of our communities in mind for those projects is also an important piece. But I think just sitting at the table together, just listening, hearing the success stories about how the Wild Rose Park or other things that are happening other places gives the councils an idea of what's working, what has worked somewhere else, what is getting good feedback somewhere else to keep in mind when they're planning for their future projects too. Yeah.
Anything else from council members? No, thank you very much. This has been a good bit of discussion and good presentation. Brings some awareness to some of the questions that maybe we need to ask as council and to pursue in the months ahead. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll move on our agenda to, there are no recommendations from committees, and we'll move to staff reports. Planning and Development Clean Energy Financing Program Administration Update. Abi?
Right. Good morning, everyone. So this item, or the purpose of this report or memo, is about providing an update to Council regarding the Clean Energy Financing Program. Recent development that has happened. So Clean Foundation has informed municipality that it intends to terminate its program administration agreement with the municipality effective November 1st, 2026, that is this fall, and also intends to stop accepting new program registrations starting June 15th, 2026 to allow time for this transition to happen. So this is being brought forward for the before the planned public communication happens about the closure of the new registrations. A bit of a quick background. As you all may know, the municipality's Clean Energy Financing Program is currently administered by Clean Foundation. And the program essentially provides low-interest financing for eligible home energy upgrades with repayments through monthly installments. In March, 2 months ago, Council approved an increase to the program administration fee to $1,400 effective April 1st, 2026. And that increase was intended to support continued program delivery by Clean Foundation. However, since that time, Clean Foundation has completed an internal financial or fiscal sustainability review and determined that even with that increased admin fee, it is still financially unsustainable for them to continue the administration of this program. And they have finally decided to actually close the administration of this program for all of its 12 partner municipalities, including MODL, Town of Bridgewater, and including even District of Chester. In regards to how this transition will happen, so Clean Foundation intends to stop accepting the new registrations on June 15th, and the purpose, as I said, for this closure date is to allow Clean Foundation to focus on completing the existing active files before the actual agreement ends on November 1st, 2026. As of April 30th, there were 32 active files on the program list. Clean Foundation has also advised that the files that cannot be completed by November 1st, 2026, Clean Foundation will still remain committed to help and support those participants to allow them to complete those upgrades by the end of the fiscal year, by March 2027. The implications for the municipality, as you all would have expected, this is not what we had thought for. This was a bit unexpected. The current agreement that we had with Clean Foundation was scheduled to remain in place until March of 2028. And staff had expected more time to assess the program and test the market before renewal or replacement at that time. But because this termination has happened so soon, it has accelerated the need for staff to review future delivery options. One another thing staff had previously noted during previous council meetings deliberations that happened in March, that the CEF program is also technically complex to deliver in comparison to the water supply upgrade financing program, which could, as you all may recall, has been transitioned to in-house delivery. But the CEF program requires home energy assessments review, confirmation of eligible upgrades, and it also requires verifications that the projects meets that required 1:1 debts to saving ratio. And given all of that, at this time, staff do not have in-house technical expertise or even capacity to directly administer this program in-house. So staff will be reviewing options to support continued delivery of the program, including options to procure alternate service provider and bring forward a report to council for council consideration in the coming months regarding the future program delivery. But in conclusion, the message is that essentially as this transition happens, the existing participants or residents who are currently going through these upgrades will be continued to get support from Clean Foundation as this transition happens. And in the meantime, staff are exploring options for alternate service provider. But no council decision is required today, but this is a form of providing an update to council regarding the development that has happened.
Okay, thank you. So no council decision, but if there are questions, this would be the time to ask. Councillor Burns.
I mean, obviously, this is disappointing. I have a number of residents who really look at these programs favorably, and almost on a monthly basis, I actually see how the money is recouped when people end up selling their homes, or new people are moving into homes that were more marketable because of the improvements that were made. So it's definitely disappointing to see a wrench thrown into it. I understand the CEF program would be much more technical complex, so I look forward to what the appropriate solution would be on that. My focus really is on, as we head into the warmer months, how is it that we can ensure that there isn't uncertainty about the ability to continue to use the water upgrade program? I know that the applications that are already in are, grandfathered in a way. They're going to continue. What about the folks that the light bulb hits them in June and say, wow, I wish I'd done this in February, but I didn't. I'm going to start this now. How is it that we can direct them so that there's a pipeline for them into the system to at least get the application in? Is there anything we need to change on our end to do that? Or, and I recognize that might not be an answer for today. I guess that's my concern as we look at options. I guess it's a question, but hidden as a comment to be as options come forward. It would be nice to know that the pipeline for the water supply program is protected as we head into the warmer months.
If I may, short answer is yes, it would remain protected in the sense, so as you all may know, Council has already approved in-house transition of the program delivery. It only is just like a matter of time from this to until November, where staff has already planned and internally training respective staff people so that when that program delivery happens in-house, we will start intaking those applications and continue to provide financing solutions to residents and help them make those upgrades. But yeah, this is more about the CEF program, which is relatively complex to deliver in-house, so we may have to look for alternate service providers for the CEF program.
And just as a quick follow-up that I certainly don't expect an answer to today, if there is an option available, or if it's even feasible for us to move up our implementation of what we're doing in-house, it's obviously disappointing to know that there won't be further applications after a date that is at the beginning of the summer months. And so I wouldn't want us to have what is a fantastic program slightly tarred a little bit by the fact that people can't apply until November because they're stuck in this gap. So if there is any option available to us to try and plug that, recognize the difficulties, but would welcome that coming back to the table at an appropriate time.
I further through the chair, the mayor, and to Councillor Burns, the water financing program for sure, we are intending to transition it in-house. It was my understanding that Clean was going to continue taking water applications. Is June 15th still their date on water as well, Abhi?
I think the intent there for the water supply was to take on applications, only the ones they are hopeful they would complete before the transition happens, like before November. Right. So they can still accept applications if they believe that the homeowner can complete those upgrades. But the reluctance was not to get them on board with like many applications, because when that transition happens, it may become relatively difficult for staff to handle all those active files. At the time, the focus was to have Clean wrap up as many as possible active files rather than continuing accepting new applications, knowing that they won't be able to complete those upgrades. Yeah, but they still can apply if they think they can complete those upgrades before November. Yeah.
Because it was through to the chair. I believe that the intent, June 15th wasn't the hard date for water, it was a hard date for CEF. So they are still taking water applications. We see applications come every week, for sure.
Yes.
So people are still applying. And so the intent was, if I would say if a homeowner does have an issue with Clean, that you could refer them back to staff. And, we'll do what we can to make that happen if it becomes an issue.
Was there anyone else on this? Okay. Oh, Councillor Smith?
You mean on the report in general? Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I know that the report will be coming back, but just to confirm, there are other providers, service providers in the province that are currently working with municipalities. I just took a look at SwitchPace, for example. They would be an option I assume we would be looking at. They seem to offer quite a comprehensive program, in fact, in some of the things that we had looked at when a review of the program first came forward to this council around marketing and communication. They seem to have more tools more services that they offer as part of the suite of CEF funding to municipalities. So I know the report is going to come back, but I just wanted to assure people who may be listening that there are other options, and that we're not really, although this is disappointing, there are options for transitioning, and maybe you could just comment on that. I only know of SwitchPace, but are there other service providers that municipalities in Nova Scotia are using right now?
Yeah, certainly happy to comment on that. I think we at a staff level are also aware of only SwitchPace being the alternate service provider who has been working with other municipalities and delivering that program. And rightly so, we will include or explore that option as we come back. Even like also from procurement perspective, one option is to go out and issue a full RFP to procure, let's say, SwitchPace or any other consultant. Or we are also exploring if another municipality has already gone through public procurement process, that would make our process a bit more efficient. For example, we are aware Halifax, they recently launched their home energy upgrade financing program only 2 months ago, and they had went through an extensive public procurement process, and they have procured SwitchPace to deliver their program. So there may be an opportunity to piggyback on that RFP process that would allow us to quickly retain or hire any other consultants. But that certainly is one option. I may be jumping ahead of myself. I don't know what other options there may be. So that's why I said like staff will do and explore more options and come back with an extensive report for council consideration before any decision is made. But yeah, that certainly remains one of the options. Yep.
Anything else from council? Not seeing anything. We'll thank you, and we will stay tuned for the next installment on this. We'll move then to mayors, deputy mayors, and councillor matters, and the LCLC report. And Councillor Hubley, please.
Thank you. The following are the highlights from the LCLC meeting held on May 20th, 2026. Staff reviewed outstanding accounts receivable and identified a small number of invoices that have remained unpaid for various reasons beyond reasonable collection periods. Collection efforts to date have been unsuccessful, and in some cases, sponsorship agreements were renegotiated to recover a portion of the outstanding amounts. The board passed a motion to approve a write-off of $9,001.90 and set up an allowance for doubtful accounts in the amount of $2,185.50. The bad debt expense is $9,533.08. In 2024-2025, the capital budget included $10,050 for the development of storage solutions for arena users. Their turnover in the GM position in the fall of 2024 contributed to the delay in advancing capital projects. As a result, the board approved to carry forward unspent funds to ensure completion of previously approved initiatives. These funds were deferred on the LCLC financial statements. Staff have identified a prefabricated storage locker design that can be secured to the wall without impacting the in-floor heating system. The board passed a motion to reallocate this carryover to fund the storage upgrade costs. The board approved the establishment of Privacy Data Protection Compliance Program to achieve compliance with Bill 150 by April 1st, 2027 for a period of up to 24 months, managed through IT shared services, in an amount not to exceed $13,750. This amount was not included in the LCLC budget, therefore it will be coming to council for approval soon. The design for accessible signage in the Aquatic Center has been completed and will serve as a template for regulatory signage throughout the facility. The new website has been populated with information. Staff continue to finalize remaining content, and once training has been completed, LCLC will transition to the new site. Collier Project Leaders has been retained to provide project management services for the Aquatic Center tile project. A detailed scope of work has been developed for the required architectural design services. The next step in the process is the procurement of an architectural consultant to undertake the design phase. We have an optimistic timeline of the end of August, beginning of September for the work to begin. The arena compressor has been ordered with an anticipated arrival and installation date of July 2026. The month of April was very busy. The facility hosted South Shore Expo, Regional Heritage Fair, Logan Mania Wrestling, Science Fair, Easter Market, and Employment Solutions Job Fair. A large advertisement for Kia Canada has been installed on the arena boards, and in the next few weeks, there'll be a large banner installed. Finally, you may have heard about a multi-day pool closure. The closure was due to broken glass on the pool deck. The pool had to be drained, cleaned, refilled, and brought back up to temperature with water chemical rebalancing prior to the reopening. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Hubley on that? Okay. Councillor Reinhardt.
I was just wondering if you anticipate through the chair, like a closure period for that tile work at the end of July or August?
There will be a closure period when the project does begin, and we're not sure at this time how long or exactly when, but there's definitely going to be a closure.
Any other questions? Okay, the Deputy Mayor informs me she doesn't have anything to report over the last couple of weeks, so I'll go to my report as your mayor. Over the past 2 weeks, my activities included a meeting with our MLA, Becky Drouin. This meeting was held at her request to discuss a number of initiatives and priorities currently being advanced by MODL as a municipality. These conversations are important in maintaining strong communication and collaboration between municipal and provincial government as we work on issues that impact our residents and communities. I attended the Trash Talk event in Baker Settlement organized by Councillor Hubley, and I would encourage councillors, and I know Councillor Smith did this as well, encourage councillors to consider hosting a similar event within your own districts to give residents an opportunity to learn more about the many recycling programs that are available for batteries, electronics, tires, and other materials, as well as the changes and additions resulting from the extended producer responsibility program that is now in place. It was clear that everyone attending learned something new about what can be recycled and which waste stream items belong in, including myself. Things that you thought you were doing correctly, maybe not. The CAO and I met with Deputy Minister of Emergency Management, Sandra McKenzie, to discuss opportunities to further develop fire service training resources within our county. We currently have training props located at several of our fire departments, and we discussed how these resources could potentially be enhanced to better serve the region, particularly given the closure of the Provincial Fire School and the increasing demands for training within fire service. This was a very positive discussion that will be followed up in the coming weeks with Chris Kennedy and Emily Bowers, one of our local trainers. And they held that meeting last evening, and the follow-up this morning with Chris was that it was a very positive meeting, and we'll be following up with a number of considerations around these potential initiatives, particularly around the training and how we can cooperatively work with our neighbors on developing a more robust training facility. I say facility, but it's really, I think we're thinking about how we can use the resources that we currently have and enhance those at our various fire departments to provide better training opportunities. I also participated in a meeting jointly organized by the Nova Scotia Nature Trust and municipal staff to communicate details of the conservation easement now in place to protect Cape LaHave Island. The purpose of the meeting was to outline permitted use on Cape LaHave and to promote the Guardian program for volunteers interested in monitoring activity on the island. There was a good turnout and positive reception from residents. One resident raised the issue of moorings at Cape LaHave, and staff will be exploring the possibility of whether we can establish public moorings in the area. The Deputy Mayor and I, together with our CAO, met with Mayor Myra and Deputy Mayor Bailey and their CAO from the town of Lunenburg to discuss several issues of mutual interest. Topics included access to water and shower facilities from the town in the event of drought conditions, the future of the Lunenburg Commons land, long-range recreation planning and programming, the potential for a shared tourism strategy, sewage concerns related to Back Harbor, and opportunities for expanded shared services between the town and MODL. It was a productive meeting with several items identified for further exploration. I had the pleasure of presenting MODL swag to relay runners participating in the Peace Run hosted by Hebbville Academy for students in grades primary through 6. The Peace Run visited schools in Mahone Bay and Liverpool last week, promoting peace, kindness, and consideration for others. The relay runners entered the gym carrying the peace torch, engaged students through songs and storytelling, and then everyone headed outside to run around the field. It was a beautiful day, and it was well received by the students. The Peace Run has been in 155 countries around the world and has involved more than 7 million participants. I also spoke at the Nova Scotia Nature Trust Showcase event held at Alderney Landing in Dartmouth on Friday evening. This event brought together donors and volunteers to highlight the accomplishments of the Trust over the last year. It was a beautiful evening featuring videography of some of Nova Scotia's most special natural places, and also included interactive displays showcasing the organization's work to preserve land from development. I shared MODL's experience working with the Nature Trust and reflected on the long and complicated history of Cape LaHave Island. Finally, like many of you, I attended one of the many school fairs this past weekend and volunteered at the May Day event at West Northfield. And I know there were lots of you involved in these activities as well. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has on that report. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if you would comment further on drought conversations. I think it was mentioned in the last mayor's report that this has come up at the mayor's table. And then in this report that it's coming up in conversation with the town of Lunenburg. And I think it is on the minds of everyone right now that we may be in for another very tough drought season. And I would just love to hear more about what people are thinking at these different tables, and also just request that at some point it come back to this table so that we're talking about it, because, and that's a little bit vague, but I think we know that, you know, the concerns are very real about dry wells and all the issues that people faced last year around accessing laundromats and everything else. But if you could comment further, that would be great.
Well, there will be a staff report coming forward on, because we have budgeted money to set up some to address that, and that'll be coming back in a staff report, I think, within the next few weeks. I don't have a specific date today, but I know it will be coming back. So I think that will be an opportunity for further discussion on it. The discussion with Lunenburg was really looking at what could be provided by the town of Lunenburg to serve the communities that are closest and surround the town, rather than having residents come this way. And it started as a result of a informal conversation that the deputy mayor and I held at some event we were at about this, and the willingness of the town to help us. It was very open to that, and we're looking at what could be provided as a public outlet using their water, and that was to be taken back to our staff to look at what's possible, and also what shower facilities might be available to our residents, and looking to what the schedule might be to accommodate the public, but also not interrupt the usage of some of the facilities, either at the fire hall. The deputy mayor has also suggested that showers at the public pool would also be an option, but we need to be able to figure out a scheduling for that so that it's that it works and that we're ready should that be needed. So that's the extent of the conversation with Lunenburg, but they were very open to helping us, and so it went back to staff to follow up with them. Anything else anyone wants to ask? So next week, our Finance Committee meeting is, we won't be holding a Finance Committee meeting, but there are other activities that day, and I think as far as Councillor Reinhardt, we will be having a CAO evaluation meeting that morning at 9 o'clock. I see no further business on our agenda, so the meeting is adjourned.